Okay, hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. We don't have a name for it yet, but maybe we'll just keep it as the podcast. My name is Austin Zest.
My name is Florian Rölke. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. And we're going to talk about some stuff today. I mean, the world is crazy. Economy, technology is changing. It's kind of scary, to be honest. Like a lot of stuff is, like I bet you a lot of people are freaking out right now. And, you know, I think a lot of people, too, don't want to even see what's going on. It's kind of too much. But it's not all scary. Some of these changes, I think, are good and necessary. And a lot of the times on the news, right, they tell you stuff to make you scared, to make you freak out. And, you know, when calm, cool, and collected in difficult situations, that's the way to be. So take a deep breath. Relax. Everything is going to be fine, you know, because we've made it through many times throughout history, and that gives me a lot of courage, you know, and like calm, right? So, yeah, man. Hope everybody out there is doing well. We're already in April 5th, which is crazy. Can't believe how quick this year's gone. Florian here, he's been working in AI a lot, and he's kind of really seen the development, how quickly. I wanted to ask you, what do you see? Okay, so this is kind of the thing with like ChatGPT, OpenAI right now. OpenAI, I think they cost like, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below, but I think it's $7 billion per year to keep OpenAI running. So it's a lot of money to keep them going. You know, maybe that's because it's in California, because it's very expensive to maintain all of that. I don't know. But then there's DeepSeek on the other hand, which I've heard from what I understand is a lot cheaper to maintain. So I just been watching, you know, what's going on with China and the United States, and there's kind of another trade war going on. United States wants to kind of bring manufacturing back and kind of be less dependent on other countries, you know, especially China. I don't know how they're going to do that so quick. I don't think it is going to be a quick process. You can't just start manufacturing and, you know, everybody's lined up to work and build. So, but maybe in some of these things it is. I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, what do you think of DeepSeek and where is this AI going? Is it going to be a worldwide thing? Why do you think this is going on? Like, is there going to be a split, like kind of like a Cold War, like a Soviet Union war? Now it's going to be within China. I know Russia's starting to kind of get into AI and stuff like that, and they really are. But you see that kind of happening? Is there going to be like a Cold War between China and the United States with AI technology? Because whoever actually really controls the AI technology as a full nation with people able to work it and everything is probably going to control a lot of the world. So I wonder if that's underlining what's really going on here with these tariffs and this huge economic change. We're kind of leaving the old, stock market's kind of crashing, all this kind of stuff is going away. And then you see crypto and you see AI, they're holding strong because it's not like they're dependent on manufacturing and, you know, physical locations necessarily. So anyway, that was a lot, but what do you think's happening with all that?
That is a very good question, and I'm sure that if I were to have the precise answer, I would be the preeminent, foremost expert on those topics. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out the answer to that. What I can say is, apparently DeepSeek has figured out a way to deliver the same kind of quality output, or even surpassing OpenAI and other models on the benchmarks, in a way that was more economical to build and to train these models. And I do think that eventually, that would be my personal prediction, I don't think there's a way for American companies to compete with Chinese companies. I think over the long term, in the way that the infrastructure there seems to be set up with the energy supply, because this is going to be then the next question for AI, how much energy can be supplied. And I do believe that China is set up very, very strongly with energy resources in order to be able to supply the training of these models. And so I do think that it might be likely that China is going to outcompete and find the way to build the best models for the market. But the bright side of that really is that there are also a lot of open source models and a lot of smaller models that you can run on your own server, or you can even host the server space for $20, $50 in the cloud, and you can host a model there, which in the same way as blockchain is meant to give us more freedom and more control over the resources because they can't be controlled in a centralized way. At least that's the narrative. That's what they aim to solve.
In theory, yeah. Some of them are completely decentralized. Most actually have some centralization still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with AI, I do think that is going on too. And I think that a lot of those models will adapt to being open source so that you can basically utilize the same module. So if I had, for example, hydro energy on my homestead, which I'm looking to set up, and a big server there for a few $1,000s, I could run these models there location independent because the code would be open source. So that's the positive, that's the bright side of that. And yeah, what was the other question?
Well, there was a few questions in there, but like, what do you think? What is the end goal here? Or how about this? Where is AI gonna be in 5 years? I mean, is it gonna be? I mean, everybody's using it now for the most part. Maybe not everybody, but we kind of started using ChatGPT very new. Like feels like a lifetime ago because we've done so much with the technology. You can brainstorm ideas. If you're a great thinker, it can be your best friend and kind of your enemy because it gives you so much to utilize. If you have business ideas, you can But then 2 weeks go by and you're going through these different business ideas and then you're it's easy to get sidetracked. So it makes it almost hard to focus on one thing at times, which I think is part of what you do, right, Florian? That's part of what he does is help people to find clarity on that exact issue. Finding, okay, I have all these options now, and AI doesn't necessarily help with that. It can help you to kind of figure things out, but it's also it can also be dangerous because you can go down all these. I can do this, and this. And you trick yourself into thinking, the AI tricks you into thinking that, yes, you can do all of these things, but it's a lot more work and a lot more difficult than you originally think. So it's better to just kind of zero in on a couple things, 3 or 4 things. But I was just wondering, where do you think where is AI going, in 5 years from now? Is it just like that's what I don't really see. Has it already been used by the governments of the world, and it's like now it's just in the public, and they realize it's going to be a race to? It's like the new Manhattan Project or something. I don't know. Like, where do you see AI in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that is a very good question, a very important one, and I do think I've made up my mind on that and really researched that deeply and pondered on that and gathered information and talked to a lot of experts as well on that. We in our community, now me in the picture. Yeah. So when we talk about 5 years, I do think that AI gives us the opportunity to really define the tasks that we are doing. With AI now in businesses as well, and people that are afraid about their job security with AI in the workplace, it gives us an opportunity to define really what are the tasks that we're doing in the business. So it gives us much more clarity because in order to automate something or utilize AI for the help of getting a task done, we need to know precisely what the task is. And generally that has been done in business already, where you write something that's called a standard operating procedure to train other staff. Right, to describe precisely what the process of the task is. And AI gives us the opportunity to do that because some of those tasks will be done by AI, and so that we get to understand what are actually the essential tasks in our business. So if we have a flooring company who installs wooden floorings for people, right, there will be an element of advertising, and then you talk to the people who are interested, and then a sales conversation takes place. And then there's invoicing and accounting, and all of these are functions, right? All of these are tasks that can be defined in what it entails. And so AI will do some of that. And then is the question, how can we as humans bring unique value to the company outside of that? And so it has become less scary, in my opinion. The thing of this AI that will control us in that type of way, yes, there's a possibility for that, for sure. But I do think that you can be controlled if you let yourself be controlled. If you are very addicted to social media and you're very in the stimulation, I mean, the glasses and the goggles and the metaverse, all of that will be coming. And it is a personal choice for people to say, but it has been so for the last 20 years. It's like,
Right.
do you get tempted with playing video games all day, which are hyper stimulating? And I've done that in my life as well. It is very enticing and very stimulating, but it is a personal choice.
Yeah.
You know deep inside in your heart of hearts that this is not the best use of your time.
Right.
And so it will get harder and harder to resist, but people do have the personal choice to say, I will not engage in that.
Right.
I will spend my time out in nature or with other humans or
Right.
doing the things that are meaningful to me
Right.
in the way that I conduct business and bring value to the marketplace. And so in that sense is that it has gotten less and less scary to me, because all that AI can actually do is do the tasks that we do with enhancement or do them better. And until and unless we get to the BCI, the brain-computer interface, which potentially will be the progression of the technology, but I do also think that there is a case where you can say no to that. And so then you will have AI when you, instead of talking to a bank teller, you will talk to a little computer interface, for sure. But on the other hand, I do think there's a way how you can say no to the influence AI of your life. And I do think there's also a cap on what AI can do and cannot do in terms of these tasks that it will take. Does it make sense?
That does make sense, yeah. Because remember when you first showed me AI, when I was like, dude, don't touch it. That's bad. It's just kind of my first reaction.
Sure.
There's always a reaction to new technologies where people have a resistance to it. Like the fork, I think, was one as well. Like, they thought that was from the devil because you're supposed to eat with your hands or something like that,
Okay.
Which, in rock and roll music, for example, rock and roll music from like Elvis and stuff, that was from the devil, and that, and it depends on how you grew up and what context and what religion you are and where how you see the world, and if you see the world as this kind of, it's just good or bad or this is that or this is that, which I have had that periodically through my life. I might be that way next year more. It just seems to, sometimes be that. But when I'm real and kind of more adult in my thinking, I realize that, all these things are what we put into it. It's like, instead of passing the responsibility and saying, oh, it's evil, it's bad, or crypto, it's going to be the mark of the beast, it's going to control us all. It's like, okay, well, aren't we kind of already that in a lot of ways? Like we're pretty heavily controlled. Most of us are, looking at glued to our phones, and we're being influenced anyway so much already. So it's kind of like we're, I don't know. The way I look at it is like I'm along for the ride. Let's just see where this thing goes, And I think what the interesting thing though about AI is like the interesting part that I think is like the manufacturing side of it. AI robots are starting to come out in the United States, Tesla and stuff like that. That's pretty interesting. Are wars of the future going to be that? I don't think we're there yet. I don't think that because you have a lot of energy to build those robots. You got to build all those things, and then you got to train them, and not then let them break down. And how do you power them constantly? Like, there's a whole thing within that. So we're not right there where it's like everything's going to take over. Like my job, using Salesforce and, helping people, helping customers, like it's not going to be that quick, where AI is just going to take over all of that right away. And it probably will take a lot of jobs, a lot of jobs that are going to take automation. But then we got to think again, stop being lazy, and start thinking in new ways. And, it's like, I'm just going to use America as an example. A lot of people are, I'm not saying lazy, but we've gotten quite complacent too in a lot of ways. And it's like, we live here in Peru, right? And people hustle like crazy. They're in the streets selling, just making things happen. Not saying that you want to be in that constant state of kind of survival, but I think a little bit of pressure to sort of, okay, maybe in 5 years my job's at risk. well, let me plan for that. Let me figure out a new way. Let me learn about this AI. Maybe I can be the guy who knows how to implement this. Or I think it's a way to have a lot of opportunities too. Like we're gonna, as human beings, we can think in a greater way now. But easier said than done. If you have a family and it's depending on your job and all that stuff, and we go right into the survival mindset. And I've been really, telling my fiance who grew up here in Peru, and like there's a huge survival mindset. I think that's all over the world, but it's really obvious here. Getting out of that survival, fight and flight, and like in a state of creation. So I think we can use AI as if we're not in that, oh my God, it's gonna kill me, and thinking all negative, and it's like using it for war and all that stuff. Like just, use your own. If we use it as a positive force, I think it can be great. So I don't know. It was a long way to say that. It was a lot of words to say that.
Yeah, and look, let's be real. It might, but so, as you said, with knives, so with machine guns, so with electricity, all of that has been used in order to also engage in warfare. So I think it's up to us right now to really clean up our lives, to really get clear on what do we actually need as a person, to get strong in our center so that we depend less on external fulfillment. This is one of the themes that we've been talking about in the last episodes as well. When we find that in ourselves, we strengthen each other, we relate to communities. What do we actually really need in a survival situation? You will need a shelter, like home, a space, and that will be provided for. Food as well, it will be there. And then it's just the expression of your heart of helping and giving to people. So even if there's a mass loss of jobs and opportunities, we will still need to help each other.
Yeah.
And in the way that's one of the polarities of the United States, there's a lot of charity work being done. Like food stamps, homeless shelters, a lot of people in churches, right? Mm-hmm. They engage in a lot of philanthropic and charity work, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And there will be more than that, and people will start growing food again as well as part of that. So we will adapt. We definitely will adapt. And where it will lead us to, whether there will be wars being fought by robots, we will just have to see. What is important, though, that we strengthen our human connections right now, that we will set ourselves up for a scenario where we have a lot of family connections and we have a lot of friends and a lot of good people where we can, in a hard situation, support each other. This is one of the things that I've realized that I look back on the last year. That I've been pretty proud of myself, of how I've been able to set myself up with connections, with ties in different countries, not only here locally where I live, but also online, with building a lot of close relationships that whenever I was going through some hard times, and that has happened in the last year and in the last month periodically, where I was like, man, when you can rely on other people. And that is what I would encourage people to do. AI will take some tasks, but we will find what our unique gift is as humans to bring to other people.
Yeah, that's a pretty deep point there. Yeah, kind of want to talk about a little bit of what's up with like the crypto. Crypto is another kind of in line with AI, I think. Even though Bitcoin seems to have come out before AI in the blockchain technology that I'm still figuring out, as I'm learning. But there's definitely going to be a huge role with crypto that I see. So like the coins, you can gamble, meme coins, you can gamble with any of that stuff, or you can invest and look at these real world asset coins that are actually going to be used in, digital banking. I mean, call it, we can run away from that or look at reality, and it's like, I used to think, oh man, digital banking, that's so bad. It's going to be, obviously if they try to make a one world coin, I think there's like world coin that's set up from OpenAI, which is kind of sketchy, like you have to take your iris scan and you'll get tokens from that. I don't like that. I think that's, very sketchy. But some of these other coins though that you'll be able to have instant transactions. It's really hard for us. We live in this Peru. Sometimes it's hard to send money and receive. Like if the banks are not open, I mean, it's a tough thing. So I see now the real world value with some of these coins that I'm putting, my change in there early, before they go up. and there's no guarantee that it'll go up. It's not like financial advice or anything like that. I'm just saying, look into some of these coins that are like really like the ZBIC network. That's the one I keep talking about. It's like at a fraction of a penny right now, and the value is so much there. It's not just they're linking up with MasterCard. They're already doing payouts. So like this coin, for example, is going to be used for payment systems. So you work your 9-to-5 job. You get paid every 2 weeks. For a lot of people, they need that money that day. So this system, if ZBEC coin is linked up with your job, you can deposit however many hours you worked that day. And that could be, it's not something I would really want to do, but but hey, maybe after 1 week you can take that out instead of every 2 weeks. So that's a very powerful asset. Then like crypto autos, that's like another one that's like they're gonna be used for renting cars and sending payments around the world. So maybe you can rent your car in Italy before you even get there, or in Dubai. I think they're already making connections there. So that's like you buy crypto auto coin, and then you can just instantly transfer it, to get your car rented instantly with no real issues, and it's quick. Or you can buy a car like that. And so those haven't even started yet. We haven't even seen that begin. So that's why I'm pretty excited about crypto and how it can be used, and that's the whole thing though, keeping it within the hands of people as much as possible. That's kind of the thing, people like to control, the governments want to control their people with the money. So, but I'm sure there'll be a way for everybody to be happy. You know what I mean? I'm sure there'll be a way for it to work out for everybody. But I'm very interested in these cryptos, man. It's gonna start taking off. So, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think we will go through a phase where it will be difficult to find these solutions and to apply them, but that will only be a span of like a few years, and then solutions will come out. I remember Tony Robbins, for example, he structured his company in a way, I forgot the exact term for that, but where basically the company is being split equally in equity among the employees. So the employee earns and helps grow the company, they have kind of an automatic part of the equity being deposited in their company account, so to speak.
Okay.
I can look up what that is exactly called, but there will be new and innovative ways of how we can compensate other people.
That's right.
And the more intelligent AI becomes, there are also still a lot of good actors in the world.
Yes.
And they seem to be increasingly growing. Yeah. And as a lot of people grow stronger, they realize that they want to give. And in the same way as you described this survival mode where a lot of people are in, a lot of people right now lose their fear of saying like, well, I always wanted to do good for other people. Now is my time. If I don't do it now, then I probably won't do it at all. Now it would be the time where something is calling me to really rise to the best version that I can be, right? A lot of people seem to feel that. And so whether that is with crypto, with finding coins that are being utilized to minimize leakage and to minimize waste, also energy waste and transaction. People stand in line and they waste their time, and then you need to spend time looking for your change, and then you don't have change, and then the person goes to and makes change. All of these are inefficiencies, right? With crypto and with blockchain, that can be also avoided on a much higher level.
Right.
We all know that that's one of the points that is being brought up against fiat currency, that it costs a lot of money just to maintain all of that. Now, I'm not arguing against complete doing away with fiat currency, but I'm saying that there are inefficiencies. And the more we progress, the more sophisticated these systems become. We also will find more and better solutions for people and all of that. With crypto, optimizing our health so that people overall have more energy to give. And as I said, then there will be probably a time where a lot of people will have lost their jobs, and when they're like, well, what do we do? But if you have food, and if you have shelter, and if you have human support, and especially if you ingest good nutrition, you don't really need healthcare that much. Now, you still want to have an insurance, of course, but like if you maintain yourself healthy, food, shelter, human connections, and a meaningful way to serve and to give, to do something with your energy that fills you emotionally, a lot of people will find their ways to make it through that, and then systems and independent organizations, NGOs, and even governments will catch up and provide these systems for people probably around 2032 to 35 or 37. That's kind of where I see that. But in the meantime, yeah, it can be shaky. But we are about to witness a new system, right?
There seems to be something like that going on. When you're talking about the healthcare, pretty interesting that I feel like, what is this obsession with being so dependent on pharmaceuticals and just all these things. It is something like the individual person. You are the healthcare system too. Like you need to take care of your health and also, but that's where kind of some of the other conversations that we have when there's spraying crap in the sky and when there are chemicals in the food and the water and everything, like that's creating more of the disease. So you're keep depending. So those two things are completely, synced together, and not everybody sees that. But I think more and more people do understand that. But when we're so distracted, it is so difficult, to think about these types of things when you're just in survival. A lot of Americans are in survival too. A lot of Europeans are in survival mode as well. So it's not just here in Peru where it's kind of easy to see, right? We can see it. But in other Western countries, we're definitely in the same thing. I'm sure in China, I'm sure in Russia, our so-called enemies and stuff. It's like we're all kind of dealing with the same thing, and that's something that I think we need to remember too. It's like we're fighting each other over really nothing, like over what differences, like it doesn't even make, religious differences. Get over it, guy. Come on, like I bet you a lot of the extremist groups of any religion are probably controlled by the same entities anyways, who, whether it's entity or whether it's, secret organizations or secret cults, who want to control it. There's something that we forgot, which is just like it's these people or it's this people, and it's like, hey man, we've kind of bought into that, we've got China as an American, it's China's the enemy, and the Chinese people they're trying to, well, the U.S. they're not exactly innocent either, like I think about that a lot too, like okay. China, so now for cheap goods around the world, we like Temu, for example. I'm sure you've seen their ads. Well, why is it so cheap? Why is it, like a cotton shirt or whatever? It probably isn't cotton. It's probably synthetic. For 5 soles, you see ads and it's like free shipping. It's like, well, how does that happen? Well, people don't understand. That's like basically slave labor, and that's kind of sucks. I'm tired of that, I don't want it, and it hurts sometimes when I think about that. They have to put nets around a factory to keep people from killing themselves. Like that's not a good world. That's not right, and then people benefiting all over the world with these cheap goods that we don't need, for the most part. And so that's something that I would say to the Chinese government. It's like, that that's not. There's got to be a better way than that. And then we see on the U.S. side where maybe it's not that bad, but it's a different form of that. People we're in our own kind of prison. Health, mental health prison, ambitious prison. It's like, the whole world is in an interesting place right now, and I think. There needs to be like a big breath, like a big sigh of relief. The earth and everything, like you can feel it, can feel the tension. You can feel the anxiety. It's just like, and you have to do a lot of work to not feel that and to kind of rise above that, right? It's some really difficult times. You have to look yourself. You have to really look at the way things are, and then try to be happy in the midst of all that, or at least find content. And that maybe that's the lesson here. And but I just really feel that, like I hope that there's some massive changes here, and that really, the slavery stops. The kind of there's so much pain in the world right now that I hope each person at an individual level can can understand that, and start to take on a little bit of that and start to like, okay, well, even though, and maybe just meditate and pray on it. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but like, I do believe that. Like, okay, so this goes into like the manifestation. This goes into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and all that stuff where, people are healing themselves through thought and feeling, when Joe Dispenza, I was just explaining that to Flora the other night. Like, okay, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he was hit by a car and broke his spine, broke his back. The doctor said he was never going to walk again without this Harrington rod surgery. We're going to stick a rod in his back so he could walk again. They're saying, you're not going to walk again. Well, he said, well, no, I'm gonna do my meditations, and every day for 2 hours a day, he reconstructed his spine in his mind and started walking to the bathroom in his mind first and feeling that. How would it feel? Neville Goddard talks about that. How would it feel if you were to have this? And then you feel it, and then you focus on it, and then eventually it happens. Same thing happens with bad news. Same reason we're all being controlled by the news. It's that powerful. Then they probably have weird images that hypnotize you. So they're feeding off, they're feeding off of that whole system's feeding off of us, and we keep feeding it. And then if each generation teaches their kids to be the same way, I feel like we were on the verge of a huge awakening, and then social media kicked in. And it's like, even though there's a lot of awakening stuff going on in the phones, for the most part, it's not that. It's distractions. It's buy this. It's buy this course. It's you got to get rich. If you're not rich, you're a loser. It's alpha male. Get all the women. Screw a regular life. I don't know. Like there's so much stuff that's pulling us in all these directions. When it's like, oh, that's the whole thing. If we all realize this and we do that kind of practice, like imagine if we all just, 1 billion people at the same time, that would probably cause a big effect. 1 billion people realize, oh, we don't want this anymore. We're playing this game. We can feel it on the inside and change that. Like imagine that. But that, to me, that would be the real thing. And then I think the whole reality would literally shift really quickly. And then all of a sudden the new ideas would come. We'd figure out a way for there to be enough money for everybody, and we'd build, the world as we'd make it all work. Because I think that's how it used to be in the past, in ancient Egypt, and, when there was an Ancient of Days, that was probably, something happened to where that's not going on right now. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think, I do subscribe to that idea that on a cosmic level, the Earth is going through a part of the galaxy right now where the energy, the frequencies tend to be generally higher. Now, whether that is because of a certain constellation of planets or whether it's just a part of the galaxy that we apparently in cycles pass through. Now, I don't have any substantiation for that yet, but I did look into that, and it does feel true to me. But in order to really articulate it and say, this is the way it is, I'm saying this is the opinion that I've subscribed to, but I do think there is a way to substantiate that, and I will look into that further. But what that basically means is that everything that is not in alignment with the truth and with what's right and true for us, with what's real, is going to be burned away.
Right.
In that way. So in the same way as a lot of people, I'm a coach, I talk to a lot of people, have had experiences over the last 4 or 5 years where divorces have happened, where new marriages are being formed, right? Where the old is being let go of, where a lot of people were purifying these processes within themselves and were letting go of behaviors that didn't serve them. A lot of people that weren't fit for these new times also did end up committing suicide just at the very beginning of COVID, if you remember that. There was a huge wave of people who were just generally shaky in their lives and they couldn't take it, and they were being swallowed up by the intensity of these times. But the positive in that is that exactly what you said with Temu, of getting a shirt for like 5 soles. Right. When we shift inside of ourselves and we do these practices and we affirm a better reality for ourselves, we realize that we have worth inside of ourselves. We shift more towards giving instead of getting, because we feel less empty, because we consume less social media. Right. It gets us hooked. All of these changes. An ad for a $5 or for a 5 soles, like a $1 shirt, would not be resonant anymore. Right. And then the demand would stop. And then after all, these factories will then, have to let go some people and eventually shut down their operations over the long time. And so we can make the difference. And instead of saving the world, immediately, as Jordan Peterson says, clean up your bedroom first.
Yeah,
right? Start with your own immediate circle,
Right.
because that's already a significant impact. And once that has happened, the few people, if you have like 10 ties to close people, you can give a little bit of individual support just to these 10 people, and then it will grow naturally out of that. So I think that's going to be the solution. But that's exactly this awakening, that everybody has to take a look at themselves and say, all right, I got to be the change that I want to see.
Right. That's right.
Right? And then we can also obviously affiliate with organizations who help us with it and confide in governments. I know that not everybody's going to turn everything around just by themselves. We will need to confide and have confidence in organizations and also governments who help us set up systems that help us in this process. But yeah, I think this is the great lesson in this time, and I do think a lot of people have realized that. And then, so in the same way as we will let go of everything that is kind of not really in alignment with ourselves, for example, people doing taxes for businesses, CPAs, they will probably be concerned about artificial intelligence. But then we have to take a look at ourselves inside and ask, is that really the best expression of my aliveness, of my unique human capability anyways? And no, I'm not saying anybody should be an artist or a public speaker or a coach or anything of that kind, what we believe would be a unique expression and influencer of some kind, musician. But what I am saying is there a way how we can help people which is not just trading my hands and labor for money, which involves more of my human spirit, of my heart, and of my unique mental capabilities as a human, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like building with your hands. I like doing that. I work on the computer all day, and sometimes I'm not saying that you were saying against that either, but I'm just saying like, I hope that this gives people the opportunity to tap into, what they wanted to do when they were younger or something, like, that's what I hope, that each individual human being can find their true expression in life. But it's easy to say, we're from, at least from, Florian's from Germany, I'm from the United States, and like, even though there's issues there, there's other parts of the world that don't even, India, for example. I mean, if you're born in the ghetto slum of India, and it's like, man, these people know pain, and and maybe they don't know anything else outside of that. So and then there's people in the United States too. They can look at, them, maybe the people in India look at the people in the States as the same thing. Like, what are they thinking? It's so cold, and they're so, the people there are so into consumerism, and sometimes I struggle with here. It's very family oriented. My fiance, they're very into family, and sometimes I fight that a little bit, and I think a little bit more independent. There's not really any right or wrong way. It's just maybe the independent thing, maybe more family is not necessarily a bad thing. With an independent mindset, not how do you do that? How do you follow? How do you still be independent, but also, relying on family too, and relying on each other, and not it always resorting to, one person's leading everything and trying to control the minds of everybody, and like, because I think we're going to start seeing more of that in the world. Like, I just started watching this clips of a Mussolini, looks like a great movie on Sky TV or something like that. I don't know. I think you have to like buy it or something. But I was watching all these clips. It's fascinating. Mussolini and how he rose to power. It's just very interesting. And I think we're going to see more of that, for better or for worse. Like, I think we need to all buckle up, because like this is. I don't think. I think Europe is preparing itself. I think we're gonna. We kind of already see that. It's pretty much a centralized government there, even though. Ursula just seems like just some, like somebody's aunt, some nice old woman, when she's actually like a kind of a dictator of Europe, and United States, whether you love Trump or not, well, he's got a lot of power and control, and he's doing stuff that's like 10 years ago, people really couldn't imagine, sending people to other countries for prisons, whether it's right, whether you agree with that or not. It's like we're entering into some serious territories here. Peru, for example, the president here, she kicked out the president, she was the vice president, pretty much put him in jail. So that's a dictatorship. So I think, but are there good dictators or bad? Does every man, when they have total power, become corrupt? That's the question. That's why I think, focusing on each individual and at a local level doing something. If I ever moved back to the United States, I would definitely get into becoming the mayor or just doing something outside of yourself, and not in a place of, I need to control, because I think all the people who are in power now, they groom people when they're young, or you have to be seriously want power and control over others to even get into that position. And you have to shut off your humanity to some degree and to get in there, pretty much sociopathic. And so that maybe is not the best thing. Maybe there's a way where people, maybe things will change to where good people will start getting into these positions who don't really want to necessarily be, so I don't know. That was a lot of different things in that, but what do you think about all that? What do you think, like Europe, where is Europe going to be in the next 5, you being from Germany, and Germany has a serious history, with dictatorships, and there's a lot of mystery behind a lot of that, I think, and then you see what's going on now, and it's just it's very fascinating, the whole thing.
Yeah, that is a good question, and I wish I had a great answer to that. I think I want to call everybody to take responsibility for their own lives. If you're already in a position where you have influence, then do everything that you can for real democracy, right? In a peaceful way of reminding people of, what does the Constitution in the individual countries actually say, in the same way as people in the United States are doing that. If not, then I think it's time right now to look right where you're at, right in front of you. And as I said, start building good ties with people, because even if AI does take the job, we can also imagine a world for some people who have lost their work where the day basically consists of just good actions. You get up and then you have a few hours until you get hungry for the first time. Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to interact with people, and maybe you're going to exchange some goods, make some ways, have conversations with people, help them in some kind of way, and spend the day like that. If the job really is being substituted by AI, we will find a way. Now, this will not be immediate, but eventually the need will rise so that people find meaningful things to do every day. Mm. And so how is it going to play out in Europe? I don't know. The trend seems to be towards the government wanting to have a tight grip on having the say.
Right.
That seems to be so. On the other hand, I think that's part of these times. Exactly what we were saying, where something new is being born, where, we're taking more responsibility for ourselves. And so far, also to be fair in history, I mean, if you look at all of the structures in England, in Germany, all of those, the infrastructure and the castles that have been built, all the cities that have been built. I mean, if you've ever been to Europe, you see how centuries upon centuries, layers upon layers of human labor. People weren't mature enough yet, in my opinion, to have organized that by themselves. So back then, the government basically took advantage of people because people were still on the mindset where they let themselves being taken advantage of.
I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to actually disagree with you on that, because when you look at these unbelievable architecture in Germany, for example, World War II bombed a lot of that out, and you got to question why. United States, there were these similar structures in all the capitals, huge domes, absolutely unbelievably beautiful. And this was like all over the world. You can see similar structures, massive stone, perfect, you can't, it's just like the pyramids and stuff. I don't think that you can create those buildings in a slavery state. I think we are in that now. I think the buildings that we create now, we build them as a slavery state because look, I mean, it's hideous. You know, most of the architecture around the world, it's like brutalism, and it looks like a dystopia, not a utopia. I think the utopia was in the past. There was some sort of. So I know you haven't really studied that much, Florence. So I'm not like I disagree. I'm just saying from what I've seen, I've studied this a bit. That there was clearly a incredible thing going on that I don't think might have been cut out of history because you actually look into the history of a lot of these buildings and stuff, and there's an official story written behind it. Like it is almost the same. It's like some crazy millionaire and he built this within a short amount of time, within like a couple of years, and then they destroy it 40 years later. It doesn't make any sense. He's incredible, astounding. So what people say, that's Tartaria, which is just like a blanket statement for the old world and when you start to discover this, like, oh, there was something massive going on here. And then they see pictures like in San Francisco, there was one of these cities, and like all around the world, that it wasn't this generation of the 1800s slaves and that built this. Like this was something entirely different that I believe. And then our history was completely and utterly manipulated to have us believe just a really kindergarten, elementary view of history, actually. And I know like historians might get mad and stuff, but it's like the human mind is incredible. You can really write your history. You can create it all. And when governments are involved, and so there's a lot of work. Some people say that's like secret organizations. They call it the great work. And I don't know. I mean, there's definitely something going on, I would say, that is trying to keep humanity from waking up to this. Because if we wake up to how actually, wait a second, we are capable of that. I don't know how they built all this stuff, but maybe it was with something that we don't understand. Maybe it wasn't with gasoline machines and stuff. Maybe there's another type of technology that is there, but is not being allowed to, we're not allowed to have access to, who knows, levitation, perfect cut. And that's what I think. I always like to think bigger than, even greater than. It's like, man, there's so much to be done that we don't even know. And that's what has always tortured me, I think, throughout my youth as a young man, and still to this day sometimes, where I feel incredibly I just know that there's a much better way to live out here and everywhere. And and I'll remember this, and then when it seems like it's so far away, I would get sad, depressed pretty much, and then just kind of like, well, I have to be here. But as I'm saying this, I'm realizing, hey, I can just start visualizing it in my head, as each and every one of us can, because this microphone, this staff, everything was in the apartment building that we're in right now. Everything was visualized in somebody's head, So it's like, oh, well, we can't build something like incredible like that because of money. Well, again,
Yeah.
right.
And that was part of the point, right? Regardless of how long that has been, so that we basically were not taking responsibility so much for our own lives, and we had to have the government stake in, because right now, I would argue the average Europeans, the average Germans, the average Americans right now with their current state of consciousness would not be able to organize themselves without a leading centralized force. Not yet. Maybe we can come back to that, maybe for the first time, or maybe if the point that you argue is valid, then we can go back to what originally was there.
Yeah.
Either way, what I'm just arguing is that right now, I don't think people are there yet.
Right.
But it is changing.
Right.
And we're being called to this change by the whole intensity of the situation. As a lot of people realize right now what's really important and what is not. A lot of people go through this process of giving up and realizing that, man, I really can't keep going smoking cigarettes. That's not going to be serving me in the future.
Right.
I can't keep going being so selfish and living out these behaviors in whatever kind of way that is. A lot of people have these awakenings right now. And I think you are onto something. I think you're right on that. If we can conceive different ways of collectively utilizing our energies, which first of all, in my opinion, starts with stopping the wastage, stopping the leakage, and like increasing our energies individually, right? In the way that what kind of nutrition we take in, and also getting and giving energies from other people, right? By support, exactly what I said. Then we can do a lot of things. And as I said, there will be a certain time until we really find out how AI is going to play out and how it's going to look like in the future. I hope it will be good, but hey, there's always a chance that it won't. And in life, there was always this, it kind of was always like that. If you imagine, back then in Europe or back then in Africa, every day that you go out and provide and hunt, you could get bitten by a venomous snake or eaten by a lion, right? Apparently there were lions in Europe too.
Yeah, there were. There were a lot, 350,000. Yeah.
And so that has pretty much always been it, right? And so we got to live every day right now doing what we do. Like what are we doing in each of our individual lives, right? What is it that each of us does every day? And then we keep doing that until the end, and the end may be many decades from now or not. But that has always been the case, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, man, I love that. It's kind of leading us to talking about some solutions that are very actually so simple that can really make your life change in a positive direction. And it's like, and it's what you're not. I've heard this on people talking about this. I don't know exactly who, but probably a lot of people. It's not what you're doing; it's what you're not doing. So when there's things that are affecting you in a negative way, and you stop doing that and you see your life improve, it's like, well, keep not doing that. But it's easier said than done. You have to go through you have to go through it, and touch death in a lot of ways, you have to kind of go through all that, and then things just start to change. And so there's no real way to say, you got to wake up in the morning and do this, and this, and that's it, because it's like you can do all those things and still be emotionally immature and drink one night and screw your whole life up, so you can be, because if you, at least for me in my life, I used to be very volatile. Emotionally, I would drink and go crazy. I would go like ballistic. And I realized a lot of that was an emotional trigger. Some pain, some serious pain, and a lot of people are carrying a lot of pain around, and they're trying to numb that with all these things, right? There's so many ways to numb that now, not just drugs, alcohol, phones, all the adults content, dating apps, just like we're finding any way possible to fill something in, You talk to religious people, well, you just need Jesus, you need Muhammad, you need a fast, you need this or that. You need God, you need to reach out to God, and from what I'm seeing through all of these things, and I've done all of these things, by the way, like everything, and meditation really helps a lot by kind of like the thing that I've seen, and I've done ayahuasca 30 or something times and gone just to the deepest. And then I've still, I've had all these spiritual experiences, near-death experiences basically, and been to hell pretty much. I've had these visions and stuff. Just none of it actually shook me. It did, but it all came down to just kind of all of these things. It came down to just like me in this moment and having some better emotional control. And living in the moment and being okay with each moment. It's like so simple. It's like, oh man, I had to go through all that to find that out, and just, I don't always react it, but I'm getting a lot better. And I realize the emotional control, man, if each individual person figures that part out, and however you figure that out, because there's breath work you can do, you can write in the morning and just be aware of it. But man, that's how I think the world will be healed. Because I think so much of the problems that we're having is emotions are like the life force essence, or the battery, or that is being used. So each time you misdirect your emotional self experience by doing something negative, spending all day, you feel drained emotionally if you're looking at YouTube shorts all day, if you're doing these things, drinking, doing all these regretful things, wasting your life, you're giving that away to some like outside of you, and that's like your goal. Your emotions are actually your goal. It's not something to hate and to be running away from. It's like, oh, that is the gift to experience life. That is the difference between us and a robot and artificial intelligence. They'll probably try to recreate humans as much as they can, all this stuff. But that emotional experience, where we get to play guitar and sing and listen to incredible music and feel that thing, that is what will never be replaceable. Your job. So I think that emotional revolution will change things in a major way. And I think that is like the kind of one of the biggest ways to control humanity is through emotion. I mean, think of the news, the bad news, the good news. They're controlling humanity through that, advertising, all that. So that's I think the biggest secret.
And that will probably also be a movement in the same way as we've now seen in the last years, where people get more aware of packaging. For example, they don't want to eat food out of plastic. They want to know where it's from. Has it been manufactured humanely and fairly?
Right.
And so in the same way, at some point, there will be companies who just say, we are human only and we don't use any AI at all, or just simple AI automations for data entry in a sheet or whatever.
Right.
It will be that. That's exactly what I said, but that probably more towards the end of the next decade that we're entering in, around 37, 2014.
Sure.
But this will be there. But until then, we got to make it through it. And at one point, as we're coming up here on the hour, I think the question really that people need to take a look at and ask them is, you don't want the government to have that much say in your life. But if really nobody told you what to do, would you really be able to be your own government? That's really the point that I'm making. It's like, because a lot of people, and both of us, we know how hard that is, to really take responsibility and say, I am my own boss and I'm going to make the decisions for my own life. Right. Whether this is getting independized from the family or in the work context, a lot of people do not have the capacity to live in this state of, it's basically uncertainty, and it is a lot of responsibility. And so that was one point that we touched upon on the last episode, of the externalization of our own inner topics. Mm-hmm. We tend to point towards something else because that's usually easier than taking the responsibility and looking at these things within ourselves. And so, if we want the government to have less say in our lives, we got to have more say in our own lives and be our own government first. And in that way, it's going to be very peaceful, right? You don't have to tear it down. You just have to remove yourself from the influence as much as you can and take more responsibility for your own life. But that's exactly the point that I was making before. You can really only be controlled in the way that you let yourself be controlled. And you can actually only be influenced in the way that you let yourself influence. Now, obviously, when you said things in the sky, radiation, yes, of course. But it is also, how much responsibility can we take for our own lives? How much can we say, I make the calls in my life. And I'm going to decide, I get up in the morning, what I'm going to do. And now then the very immediate question then is, how will that work out with money? Mm-hmm. How will that work out with other people, with providing for oneself? And that is then really the creative solution that people will need to come up with. But what I want to point to is the psychological fear that's coming up when you really take full and 100% responsibility for your own life and governing yourself. Because that requires to know what's really right inside of yourself without abiding to a code of conduct that is being given to you in that type of way, right? If nobody tells you what to do every day, where you have to be at 9 a.m. at work and you make the decision for yourself, it's much harder for people. And I think this is part of what we will need to be looking at when we are having this conversation about less government influence. Yes, people want less government influence, but are they really able to influence themselves? That's, I think, where the shift also needs to go. First of all, articulating to government, because you do have a communication channel there and there are good actors in the government that you can actually reach out to and communicate with. Sure. And you can be vocal, especially right now on social media. You have actually a lot of power if you want to.
Right.
You can articulate that towards the government, towards the outside, but you can also make the transformation within and really take this responsibility and say, I'm going to be governing my own life. And I think that we'll be going both together. And it's much easier to always point on the outside. That's the point that I was making, where the real, or like one of the very courageous acts is actually to say, okay, how much outside influence do I actually need? And be really, really honest with that. If nobody told you what to do, would we be able to function? That's a good question, right?
Definitely. Yeah, that is a great question. And I love that whole, taking responsibility. So my YouTube channel is called, or my channel is like pineal gland awakening. So
Right.
to me, the pineal gland, like within the human body, is a representation of the governments of the world. And, you can look at like everything in nature, there's some sort of structure to it. So we are running our government within our own bodies. And I believe like the pineal gland, which is like an antenna, that's like, if that thing's corrupt and the antenna, the signal is not picking up the right stuff, it's just going to be distorted and you're going to be easier to control. And personally, not everybody agrees with me, but what I see happening now is more and more people are waking up to this. Towns in the United States that I never thought would happen are actually starting to ban like fluoride. They're getting together at a community level and they're saying, no, we don't want this in our water supply. That's a start. Same with those lines in the sky. People, live in South America for 4 years. I never see those. I've seen them very few times, the spraying in the sky. But in the United States, it's everywhere. And I think now Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, he's talking about it. Geoengineering, he's actually talking about it. So the people, Tennessee brought legislation to ban these as well. So that's very encouraging to me. Because I never thought that, I thought people were done, that's part of why I left. Because I just thought, people are not gonna, but people seem to be really waking up and they know that, hey, we deserve better as human beings and that we are special and that we do have worth and that we are absolutely, we're kind of like the caretakers of this earth and, we need to really take that serious. And it can be so much better. The world, everything, like really, it can be great. We're just fighting each other all the time, and we're just trying too hard. we're trying so hard, and it's like you look at history, it's like, man, I think a big history is blocked out. A big part of history has been really blocked out, and I think there's been incredible times in our history. All we see now is just war, and I don't think that was so. I think a lot of that's manipulated. I think there's been times on Earth where it was incredibly peaceful, where we were working together, where we were building pyramids that have they just found these giant cylinders underneath them that seem to be, there's something there. Some people say that maybe that was like electricity for the whole world, free energy. Maybe that's how they built all these stones and stuff. Maybe there was something harmonically much different going on. Clearly that information needs to be suppressed because we're living in, I hate to say it, but we're living in a type of hell. and I'm very open to admit that, it is hellish and it is frustrating. And, we got every right to be angry and emotional about it. And but instead of being angry and what are they doing with Tesla cars? Dude, people waste so much time. That's what's frustrating to me is how much time people waste on the most stupid things that I could possibly think of or not think of. Wake up, grow up a little bit, people. People who are doing this type of stuff. You're wasting time. You're not advancing, things. So even though people think think that's very juvenile, this whole kind of revolutionary mindset, which has a place, but it's like that's not how you do it. We gotta work with each other a bit more, and stop with childish things. Keying Teslas just because you disagree with, come on, that's really low. But an easy solution to start cleaning that. Look at your toothpaste. Look at what you're consuming. Look at the things that you're consuming in your life. Are they beneficial to you? Whatever it is, like you're creating this reality. That's the thing you got to do. You got to figure out what you want. What do you want in this world? What do you want in your life? And then what is the greater goal of the world? You got to figure that part out first before anything. Otherwise, okay. If you don't figure that, somebody else is going to do that for you. Okay? So, if you don't figure out what you want in your life, somebody else is going to figure out what you want, and you don't even know what you want because that other person's doing that. So that's why clean your pineal gland. Stop using fluoride in your toothpaste. Watch what you eat and drink and everything, and then that'll start to clear. And then you can actually start to figure out what you want in life. And then that signal will become more powerful, and you can imagine positive things in a better future. And then even if you're in hell, you can actually kind of be in a better state in your mind and create, like a heaven in your mind, because then all the difficulties actually becomes more worthwhile. And then all the adversity in your life and everything that's difficult has meaning to it. So then you might be living in like what seems like hell, but then you're sort of escaping it because you're starting up here. And then it becomes worthwhile, all the pain and everything that you've suffered in life, So I just hope that this type of message gets out to more people, because supposedly religion's supposed to be doing that job, but they're not doing a good job bringing that message out, in my opinion. So yeah.
I think that was incredibly well said, and I would love to pick up on that in the next episode.
Sounds good.
Good night, everybody.
Peace.